The diplomatic shuttle groaned as it settled onto the landing pad of Outpost Virith 9, a battered platform suspended on the equator of a broken moon. Kyle Brandt leaned forward in his seat, boots tapping impatiently on the floor, one hand bracing against the overhead panel. The artificial gravity was slightly off here, just enough to make him feel like a walking balloon in a combat suit. The hangar was quiet, sterilized, metallic, too clean for a frontier zone. And that was Kale's first red flag. The Zalari never did clean. They polished weapons, sure, adorned ceremonial armor, filed their claws. But clean, this was theater, and he was the Terran prop. "Remember," said the liaison through his earpiece, "you're here as a symbol of unity. No unnecessary challenges, no threats, no flexing." Kel grunted. "So basically, don't be myself." "Exactly. Now go shake hands with someone you don't like and pretend it's your idea." The hangar door hissed open with a sound like a yawning serpent. A welcoming party stood in a half circle. 3 guards in mirror-plated exosuits, a hovering interpreter drone, and at the center, her. She was taller than him. That was unfair. With a spine like a spear and skin the color of sunlit bronze, she stood calm in the face of Kale's swaggering entrance. Her uniform was half ceremonial, half combat gear, a fusion of elegance and brutality. But it was her ears, long, slender, edged like crescent blades, that made him pause. Not in fear, in curiosity. "You must be the human," she said. Her voice had the lilting cadence of someone who knew she could kill you with a sentence. "You must be the one with the weird Bluetooth headset," he replied, nodding at her earpiece. She blinked once, then smiled, just slightly. "It translates your charming idioms. Bluetooth is a Terran war chieftain's name, yes?" "Something like that." Cal held out his hand. "Kale Brandt, diplomatic meat shield." She didn't take it. Instead, she studied his hand as though it were a strange animal. "We clasp forearms in Zalari tradition." "Too intimate," Kyle said. "I've only just met you. Buy me dinner first." One of the guards made a sound like a muffled choke. The woman tilted her head. "You're braver than most Terrans." "Or dumber," Kyle replied. "The two look very similar up close." Introductions concluded, they walked together through the crystalline corridor leading to the diplomatic chamber. The walls shimmered faintly with embedded circuits, flickering with information streams. Zalari tech always looked like it had been designed by a species trying to impress its own ancestors. "Do all your structures have mood lighting?" Kyle asked. "Feels like I'm walking through a very expensive lava lamp." "You're being scanned," she said calmly, "for toxins, explosives, and sarcasm. They're going to be disappointed on that last one." The room they entered was circular, tiered like an amphitheater, with a transparent dome overhead revealing the bleeding skies of the gas giant beyond. A single dueling mat occupied the center. Kyle froze. "Wait, this isn't dinner, is it?" The woman stepped onto the mat, removing her long gloves with the deliberate slowness of someone undressing a weapon. "It's a cultural demonstration. We share a martial gesture to signify mutual respect." "That sounds suspiciously like sparring." "Only if you're bad at it." Kyle eyed the mat, then her. "You sure this isn't a trap?" "If it were a trap, human, you'd be unconscious already." He grinned and stepped forward. "All right, Princess Pointy Ears. Let's see what you've got." She raised a brow. "Do you nickname all your opponents?" "Only the pretty ones." The first strike came faster than expected. She moved with the elegance of someone born in low gravity, spinning inside his reach and flicking his leg out from under him. Kyle hit the mat with a grunt. "That was a warning," she said, offering a hand. He ignored it, rolling up to one knee. "Warning received. Just didn't know we were skipping foreplay." Their second exchange was longer. Kale wasn't untrained. He'd been through orbital combat simulations and fought in 4 low-atmo wars. But fighting her was like shadowboxing a thunderstorm. She anticipated his feints, countered his strikes, and at one point paused mid-block to correct his foot placement. "You lead too much with your shoulder," she muttered. "Thanks for the tip," he gasped, trying to sweep her ankle. She jumped over it like a dancer and tapped his head. Too slow. By the 5th round, he was sweating bullets. or would have been, if the climate controls weren't so aggressively efficient. He landed exactly one hit, a lucky shoulder check that knocked her half a step back. Her smile widened. "You're improving." "I'm bleeding," Kale muttered, a common side effect of improvement. He collapsed onto the mat, chest heaving. She knelt beside him with infuriating calm. "I'll admit," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind one ear, "you lasted longer than I expected." Kyle grinned up at her. "That's what she said." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "You are insufferable," she said. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She stood. "Your performance will be noted. We value persistence." Kyle groaned and rolled onto his side. "Glad to know getting beat up by a 7-foot-tall elf counts as diplomacy." "Next time," she said, walking away, "try not to flirt while losing." "I flirt better when I'm winning." "Then you may never improve." As she disappeared through the exit, Kyle closed his eyes, the ache in his limbs drowned out by the electric burn of curiosity. She hadn't given her name. She hadn't needed to. He muttered into the mat, "I think I'm in love." "Not again," said the medic arriving with the stretcher. Cal Brandt stared at the ceiling of the infirmary and wondered if dignity was a renewable resource. He had a vague sense it wasn't, at least not at the rate he was burning through it. The lighting above him was soft, almost gentle, but he still felt like it was judging him. A half-dozen pain suppressors buzzed lazily through his bloodstream, numbing everything except the memory of being flipped onto his back by a woman who hadn't even broken a sweat. "Vital stable," chirped the medical drone hovering at his shoulder. "Pride, terminally injured." "Thanks," Kyle muttered. "Let me know when it flatlines completely so I can throw a funeral." The drone beeped in what might have been sympathy or contempt. It was hard to tell with machines programmed by the Zalari. Kyle groaned and sat up slowly. His ribs creaked, his joints ached, and his armor had been returned to him with a note etched into the chest plate. "You tried." He'd read it 6 times. He wasn't sure if it was condescending or flirtatious. Possibly both. The door hissed open before he could spiral further into his bruised ego. A Zalari attendant, expressionless, silver-skinned, and most likely cyber-augmented, stepped in with a datapad in a short bow. "You are summoned." "Summoned?" Kyle squinted. "You sure it's not invited with snacks?" The attendant didn't blink. "She does not repeat herself." Kyle sighed and stood, regretting it instantly. "If I collapse mid-stride, just drag me dramatically. Adds to the mystery." He was led through a quiet corridor, this one darker than before. Walls lined with shimmering glyphs that moved when he wasn't looking directly at them. The hum of the outpost systems resonated through his bones. Somewhere behind the walls, anti-orbital cannons slumbered, dreaming of reasons to wake up. The Zalari liked their diplomacy with a side of overwhelming firepower. The door at the end opened with a low chime. Inside, the room felt less like a throne chamber and more like a strategist's den. Screens hovered mid-air, each flickering with holographic charts, battle records, and planetary scans. She was seated in the center, one leg crossed over the other, sipping something from a thin cup that smoked faintly at the rim. "Soldier," she said without looking up. Kale tilted his head. "Still haven't told me your name." "You didn't ask properly." He walked in, dragging his sore limbs behind him like half-eaten luggage. "All right, mysterious warrior queen lady. May I humbly request your actual name so I know what to yell the next time you knock me unconscious?" She set the cup down. "Virella." He blinked. "Just Virella?" "Queen Virella of House Exel, High Sovereign of the Vareth lineage, Scion of the Deep Marches, Wielder of the Tesseract Blade, and Keeper of—" "Yeah, okay, Virella works." "Got it." She gave him a look that could curdle plasma. Then slowly her lips twitched upward. "You're remarkably consistent." Kale saluted with a wince. "Insubordination is the only thing I perfected." "Good, you'll need it." She gestured to one of the displays. Kale approached and immediately felt out of his depth. The screen showed a rotating schematic of an orbital station, a tangle of rings and spires drifting above a scarred planet. "This," Virella said, "is your next mission." Kyle narrowed his eyes. "That looks like a rusted blender in space." "It's a decommissioned research hub, built during the Zalari expansion epoch. Recently reactivated under unknown power signatures. Let me guess, Kyle said, folding his arms. You want me to go poke it with a stick and see if it explodes? You're not entirely incorrect. Please tell me you're coming. I get lonely being vaporized alone. Varela stood, and Kale was reminded once again that her presence was not something the room could contain properly. I'll accompany you. Consider it continued observation. Kyle narrowed his eyes. You're studying me, aren't you? I study all unknown threats. Ouch! They departed aboard a small Zalari skiff, a sleek vessel shaped like a crescent blade. Its engines whisper quiet as it sliced through the void. Inside, the controls pulsed with reactive glyphs, alive under her fingers. Kyle, strapped into his seat like a cargo crate, glanced sideways. You ever consider flying something less dramatic? Varela didn't look up. This design has a 98% evasion rating. Against what? Fashion critics? She ignored him. The silence between them was strangely companionable, broken only by the soft ping of the navigation system and Kyle's occasional groans as he shifted in his seat. When the derelict station loomed into view, Kyle leaned forward. The structure looked as though it had been abandoned for centuries. Dark, motionless, wrapped in the debris of its own failed expansions. But there was power humming beneath it. Kyle could feel it in his teeth. They docked at an airlock that wheezed like a dying beast. Inside, the corridors were dark, lined with half-fused machinery and control panels blinking erratically. Kyle drew his sidearm. I've seen horror sims that start like this. No hostiles detected, Varela said, scanning the area with a flick of her hand. Her gauntlet flared with light, casting moving shadows against the walls. Kyle pointed his pistol at one. Shadow monsters. Classic. They moved cautiously through the station, Kyle muttering half-jokes to keep himself from thinking too hard about the fact that the only working gravity was artificial and slightly unstable. Varela led with clinical efficiency, eyes scanning, hands never idle. At the central core, they found the source of the signal, an ancient data node, Zalari in origin, pulsing faintly with compressed memory clusters. Kyle frowned. That thing looks like it'll ask me to solve riddles before it self-destructs. Varela approached it reverently. This holds war records, ones believed lost in the reconciliation. Anything in there about my great-great-granddad stealing Zalari whiskey during the armistice? She glanced at him. Possibly. The archives are comprehensive. Kyle stepped closer, suddenly serious. So this is real, not just symbolic unity nonsense? It is very real, she said, and very dangerous. He exhaled slowly, fingers twitching. You sure you trust me? No, she replied, but I enjoy watching you try. Something in her tone made Kale grin despite the gravity of the moment, and when the lights flickered and the station gave a low groan, like something ancient stirring in its sleep, he looked at her and said, You know, if we die here, I just want you to know. I was going to ask you to dinner. She didn't look away from the console. You still can. You like spicy Terran noodles? I vaporized a spice market once by accident. Close enough. The console flared to life. The past had woken, and somewhere in its memories, the future waited. The lights of the derelict station flared bright as the memory core came fully online, casting warped reflections of Kyle and Varela across the scorched alloy walls. Glyphs burst across the consoles like a storm of fireflies, ancient language unfolding with urgent purpose. The air turned thick with static. Something buried deep in the system had noticed them. Kale took an instinctive step back. If this thing starts chanting, I'm leaving. It's not chanting, Varela replied, her voice steady. It's choosing what to show us. Kyle squinted at the stream of symbols. Could it choose subtitles next time? A second later, the data stream condensed, forming a hologram between them. A war archive, decades long, playing at accelerated speed. Fleets clashed, civilizations burned. There, among the chaos, was a younger Varela in full regalia, cutting through the battlefield with clinical grace, eyes sharp and merciless. Kyle turned slowly toward her. You weren't just royalty, you were a war hero. She didn't answer. The images flickered to a newer file. the attempted extermination of a breakaway Zalari faction, one that had refused integration with the Galactic Compact. Kale recognized the insignia of a Terran support fleet, his own world's emblem in the corner of the screen, listed under collateral allies. His stomach dropped. Wait, Terrans helped with that strike? She gave a slow nod. They did not know the full extent of our plan. They believed they were aiding a peacekeeping effort. Kyle took a step away from the console. You lied. I omitted, she said, and something in her tone frayed, barely audible. I was younger. The war was ending. We feared what they would become. The data stream faded, the room dimming with its absence. Kyle stood in the silence, his voice low. So I've been shaking hands with a war criminal. I've been sparring with a hypocrite, she said evenly. How many Terran colonies were pacified under the flag of protection? Kyle stared at her. You could have told me. I wanted you to see it. There was a long beat. Then Kale broke it with a snort. You really do have a talent for the dramatic. It's a royal requirement. He shook his head and walked to the edge of the chamber, staring out through a cracked viewport. The planet below spun slowly, scarred and quiet. You know, I joined the service because I thought I was protecting people. Not whatever this is. You still can, she said. He looked back, eyebrow raised. By covering up a mass grave? By ensuring it doesn't happen again. That's why I brought you here. Not to justify the past, to end the cycle. And you thought I was the dramatic one. She walked closer, no longer the unshakable warrior, no longer the impenetrable sovereign, just a woman standing amid the ghosts of her own decisions. You survived our duel. You laughed at me. You've made fun of my ships, my ears, and my titles. And yet, you stayed. Kyle shrugged. I've got a thing for dangerous women with war crimes and sharp cheekbones. There was a small smile from her, a tired one. Then I have a proposition. If it involves another duel, I decline on account of my ribs still being in committee. No duel, a partnership. You and I both represent fractured histories. If we work together, openly, not behind closed archives, we might build something that lasts longer than our mistakes. Cal looked at her for a long time. Then he sighed. Do I get a crown? You get a desk. I was afraid of that. Back aboard the skiff, the return to the outpost was quiet. The console logs had been copied, sealed, encrypted, and sent to joint oversight for full review. Varela drafted the terms herself, letting Kale make snide comments about every fourth clause. She didn't erase a single one. By the time they docked, the diplomatic chamber had been prepped for a press briefing. Solari and Terran representatives filled the room, flanked by drones and recorders. Kale stood stiffly beside Varela as she stepped forward and began to speak. Not with bombast, not as a queen, but as someone who'd seen the end of her empire and decided it wasn't good enough. Kyle was next, and he didn't say much. Just that the past was a lousy teacher unless you let it hit you hard enough to leave a mark. And that maybe, just maybe, getting body slammed by a Zalari royal had done him a favor. He ended with, also for the record, I totally landed one hit. The Zalari ambassador blinked slowly. Is this normal human diplomacy? It is for him, Varela muttered. Later on the overlooked deck, with the moons hanging low like bruised fruit in the sky, Kale leaned on the railing beside her. So, he said, what now? We retire? Get a farm? Raise telepathic goats? You return to your post, I to mine. He squinted. No telepathic goats, huh? She glanced at him. You could visit. That sounded dangerously close to an invitation. It was. He looked out at the stars. Well, I've got nowhere better to be, and I figure I owe you at least one dinner. You owe me more than that. I'll bring dessert. A pause, soft and unspoken. Then quietly she added, You've changed. Cal exhaled, long and slow. Yeah, turns out being outclassed, outwitted, and outpunched by an alien queen is good for character development. Maybe I'll let you win next time. Please don't. My ego's healing. Let's not reverse progress. They stood there as the stars wheeled slowly overhead, the wounds of history open, but no longer festering. They hadn't solved everything. They hadn't erased the scars, but they'd made a beginning. And for two people born from different sides of too many battles, that was more than enough.